The Light of the Soul. Poor Alice Bailey. Introduction. The Science of Raja Yoga, or the Kingly Science of the Soul, as elucidated by its primary exponent Patanjali, is destined to achieve its supreme demonstration within the Occident. This is attributable to the reality that, under cyclic law, the fifth root race must inevitably attain its zenith. Within the economy of the races, that pinnacle is exemplified by the correct employment of the intellect and its utilization by the soul for the realization of collective objectives and the cultivation of group consciousness upon the physical plane. Hitherto, the mind has either been debased for material purposes or, conversely, deified. Through the science of Raja Yoga, the mind shall be recognized as the instrument of the soul and the medium whereby the brain of the aspirant becomes illuminated, facilitating the acquisition of knowledge pertaining to the soul's domain. Under the law of evolution likewise, since the mind constitutes the fifth principle, the fifth root race must be intimately concerned with it, and its corresponding fifth subrace even more profoundly than any other. Students would be well advised to retain the following correspondences in their contemplation. 1. The fifth root race Aryan. 2. The fifth subrace Anglo-Saxon. 3. The fifth principle Manas or mind. 4. The fifth plane the mental. 5. The fifth ray concrete knowledge. Every variation of yoga has possessed its rightful place in the evolution of the human being. During the initial purely physical race, designated the Lemurian, the yoga imposed upon nascent humanity was Hatha Yoga, the yoga of the physical body, that discipline which induces the conscious employment and manipulation of the various organs, muscles, and components of the physical frame. The challenge confronting the adepts of that era was to instruct human beings, who were then scarcely more than animals, regarding the purpose, significance, and utility of their various organs, thereby enabling conscious control, and to elucidate the meaning of the symbol of the human figure. Therefore, in those primordial days, through the practice of Hatha Yoga, the human being approached the portal of initiation. At that juncture, the attainment of the third initiation, culminating in the transfiguration of the personality, constituted the highest initiation that man was capable of achieving. In the Atlantean epic, the progress of the sons of men was secured through the imposition of two yogas. First, the discipline known as Laya Yoga, the yoga of the centers, which produced a stabilization of the etheric body and of the centers within man, alongside the development of the astral and psychic nature. Subsequently, Bhakti Yoga, emerging from the development of the emotional or astral body, was incorporated with Laya Yoga, establishing the foundation of that mysticism and devotion which has served as the underlying incentive during our specific Aryan root race. At that time, the fourth initiation constituted the objective. The subject of these great initiations has been expounded upon at greater length in my previous volume, Initiation, Human and Solar. Now, within the Aryan race, the subjugation of the mental body and the control of the mind are effected through the practice of Raja Yoga, and the fifth initiation, that of the adept, stands as the goal for evolving humanity. Thus, all the yogas have occupied their respective places and served a utilitarian purpose. Consequently, it will become apparent that any reversion to Hatha Yoga practices, or those disciplines dealing specifically with the development of the centers through various types of meditation and breathing exercises, constitutes, from a certain aspect, a retrogression. It shall be ascertained that through the practice of Raja Yoga, and through assuming that vantage of directional control accessible to the man who centers his consciousness in the soul, the other forms of yoga are rendered unnecessary. For the greater yoga automatically encompasses all the lesser in its results, albeit not in its practices. When these matters are studied, it will become evident why the day of opportunity has but recently arrived. The East has preserved these rules for us since time immemorial. Sporadically, Orientals have availed themselves of those precepts and have submitted to the discipline of this exacting science. Thus has the continuity of the secret doctrine, of the ageless wisdom, been preserved for the race, and thus has the personnel of the hierarchy of our planet been assembled. In the era of the Buddha, and through the stimulation he engendered, there occurred a great convocation of arhats. These were individuals who had achieved liberation through self-initiated effort. This period in our Aryan race marked a climax for the Orient. Since that time, the tide of spiritual life has flowed steadily westward, and we may now anticipate a corresponding climax in the Occident, which shall reach its zenith between the years 1965 and 2025. Towards this end, the adepts of the East and of the West are working in unison, for they adhere invariably to the law. This approaching impulse is a second-ray impulse and bears no relation to any first-ray impulse, such as that which elicited the presence of Helena Blavatsky. First-ray impulses emerge in the first quarter of each century and attain their climax on the physical plane during the final quarter. The interest currently evinced in Raja Yoga and the study of this science along with the rules it provides for man's unfoldment is indicative of the general trajectory of this rising second-ray impulse. This interest shall be increasingly demonstrated. Thus arrives the day of opportunity. There are 3 volumes which should be in the possession of every student: the Bhagavad Gita, the New Testament, and the Yoga Sutras, for within these 3 is contained a complete delineation of the soul and its unfoldment. In the Gita, we are presented with a description of the soul of Krishna, the second aspect, in his true nature as God in manifestation, culminating in that marvelous chapter wherein he reveals himself to Arjuna, the aspirant, as the soul of all things and the point of glory concealed behind the veil of every form. In the New Testament, there is depicted for us the life of a Son of God in full manifestation, wherein, liberated from every veil, the soul in its true nature treads the earth. It becomes apparent to us as we study the life of Christ what is signified by the development of the soul's powers, the attainment of liberation, and the state of becoming in full glory a God walking upon the earth. In the Yoga Sutras, there are embodied for us the laws of that becoming, as well as the rules, methods, and means which, when adhered to, render a man perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Step by step, a graded system of development is unfolded for us, conducting a man from the stage of the average virtuous individual, through those of aspirant, initiate, and master, unto that exalted point in evolution at which the Christ now stands. John, the beloved disciple, has averred that we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is, and the revelation of the soul to man in physical plane incarnation effects ever the great transformation. Christ himself has declared that greater works than I do shall ye do, extending to us the promise of the kingdom, the power, and the glory, provided our aspiration and endurance suffice to sustain us along the thorny way of the cross, and enable us to tread that path which ascends all the way to the summit of the Mount of Transfiguration. How is this profound transformation effected? How does man, the victim of his desires and lower nature, become man, the victor, triumphing over the world, the flesh, and the devil? It is accomplished when the physical brain of the incarnated man becomes cognizant of the self, the soul. This conscious awareness becomes possible only when the true self can reflect itself within the mental substance. The soul is inherently liberated from objects and stands ever in the state of isolated unity. Man, however, in incarnation must arrive within his physical brain consciousness at a realization of these two states of being. He must consciously emancipate himself from all objects of desire and stand as a unified whole, detached and liberated from all veils and from all forms within the three worlds. When that state of conscious existence, familiar to the spiritual entity, becomes equally the condition of awareness for the individual within physical incarnation, then the ultimate objective has been attained. The individual is no longer defined by the dictates of the physical form, nor, through identification with it, does he remain a casualty of the mundane sphere. He advances in freedom, his visage radiant, and the illumination of his countenance is cast broadly upon all whom he encounters. No longer do his cravings propel the flesh into motion, nor does his astral body subjugate or vanquish him. Through dispassion and the equilibration of the pairs of opposites, he has liberated himself from the temperaments, sentiments, yearnings, desires, and emotional responses that typify the existence of the common man, thereby arriving at the locus of peace. The demon of pride, the personification of the misused mental nature, and the distorted perceptions of the intellect are vanquished, and he stands liberated from the three worlds. The intrinsic nature of the soul, the attributes and activities inherent in the loving essence of the Son of God, and the wisdom that manifests when love and activity are conjoined, define his earthly existence. Thus he may declare, as did the Christ, "It is finished." The precise date of Patanjali's birth remains unknown, and there exists considerable controversy regarding this subject. The majority of Occidental authorities ascribe a time frame between the years 820 BC and 300 BC, although a few situate him in the era following Christ. However, the Hindu authorities themselves, who may be presumed to possess superior insight into the matter, assign a much earlier date, extending as far back as 10,000 BC. Patanjali served as a compiler of teachings which, prior to his advent, had been transmitted orally for many centuries. He was the first to commit the instruction to writing for the benefit of students. Consequently, he is regarded as the founder of the Raja Yoga school. The system, however, has been utilized since the very inception of the Aryan race. The Yoga Sutras constitute the foundational teaching of the Trans-Himalayan school, to which many of the masters of the wisdom belong. Furthermore, numerous students maintain that the Essenes and other schools of mystical training and thought intimately connected with the founder of Christianity and the early Christians are predicated upon this same system, and that their instructors were trained within the great Trans-Himalayan school. It must be stated herein that the sutras have been dictated and paraphrased by the Tibetan brother, while the commentary upon them has been authored by myself, subject to revision and annotation by the Tibetan. It should be noted that the translation is not literal, nor does it provide an exact definition of every original Sanskrit term. It represents an endeavor to render the precise meaning into lucid and comprehensible English, insofar as it is possible to do so through the medium of that inelastic and unimaginative tongue. The student may find it advantageous in the study of these sutras to compare the rendition presented here with the various other procurable translations. Alice Bailey, New York, May 1927. Chapter 1. The Restraint of Mental Modifications and the Attainment of Spiritual Stillness. The following instruction pertains to the science of union. This union is consummated through the subjugation of the psychic nature and the restraint of the chit. Upon the accomplishment of this, the yogi perceives himself as he exists in reality. Hitherto, the inner man has identified himself with his forms and with their active modifications. The states of mind are fivefold. They are subject to pleasure or pain, being either painful or painless. These modifications constitute correct knowledge, incorrect knowledge, fancy, passivity, and memory. The foundation of correct knowledge is correct perception, correct deduction, and correct witness. Incorrect knowledge is predicated upon the perception of the form rather than upon the state of being. Fancy relies upon images possessing no tangible existence. Passivity is founded upon the quiescent state of the vridis. Memory is the retention of that which has been known. The regulation of these modifications of the internal organ, the mind, is to be effected through tireless endeavor and through non-attachment. Tireless endeavor constitutes the unceasing effort to restrain the modifications of the mind. When the objective to be acquired is sufficiently valued, and the efforts toward its attainment are persistently pursued without intermission, then the steadiness of the mind is secured. Non-attachment is the liberation from longing for all objects of desire, whether earthly or traditional, whether here or hereafter. The consummation of this non-attachment results in an exact knowledge of the spiritual man when liberated from the qualities or gunas. The consciousness of an object is attained by concentration upon its fourfold nature: the form through examination, the quality through discriminative participation, the purpose through inspiration, and the soul through identification. A subsequent stage of samadhi is achieved when, through one-pointed thought, the outer activity is quieted. In this stage, the chit becomes responsive solely to subjective impressions. The samadhi just delineated transcends not the boundaries of the phenomenal world. It transcends not the gods, nor those concerned with the concrete realm. Other yogins achieve samadhi and arrive at a discrimination of pure spirit through belief, succeeded by energy, memory, meditation, and right perception. The attainment of this state is rapid for those whose will is intensely vital. Those who employ the will likewise differ, for its usage may be intense, moderate, or gentle. Regarding the attainment of true spiritual consciousness, there exists yet another avenue. By intense devotion to Ishvara, knowledge of Ishvara is acquired. This Ishvara is the soul untouched by limitation, free from karma and desire. In Ishvara, the Gurudiva, the germ of all knowledge, expands into infinity. Ishvara, the Gurudiva, being unlimited by temporal conditions, serves as the teacher of the primeval lords. The word of Ishvara is Aum. This is the Pranav. Through the sounding of the word and through reflection upon its significance, the way is discovered. From this proceeds the realization of the self and the removal of all obstacles. The impediments to soul cognition are bodily disability, mental inertia, wrong questioning, carelessness, laziness, lack of dispassion, erroneous perception, inability to achieve concentration, and failure to maintain the meditative attitude once achieved. Pain, despair, misplaced bodily activity, and the incorrect direction of the life currents are the results of the obstacles within the lower psychic nature. To surmount the obstacles and their accompaniments, the intense application of the will to a singular truth is requisite. The peace of the chit may be induced through the practice of sympathy, tenderness, steadiness of purpose, and dispassion regarding pleasure or pain, or toward all forms of good or evil. The peace of the chit is also engendered by the regulation of the prana or life breath. The mind can be disciplined to steadiness through those forms of concentration which possess a relation to the sense perceptions. By meditation upon light and upon radiance, knowledge of the spirit can be attained, and thus peace achieved. The chit is stabilized and rendered free from illusion as the lower nature is purified and no longer indulged. Peace may be reached through meditation on the knowledge that dreams bestow. Peace may also be reached through concentration upon that which is dearest to the heart. Thus, his realization extends from the infinitely small to the infinitely great, and from Anu to Atma, his knowledge is perfected. To him whose vriddhis are entirely controlled, there eventuates a state of identity with and similarity to that which is realized. The knower, the knowledge, and the field of knowledge become one, just as the crystal assumes the colors of that which is reflected within it. When the perceiver blends the word, the idea, and the object, this is termed the mental condition of judicial reasoning. Perception without judicial reasoning is arrived at when the memory no longer maintains control, the word and the object are transcended, and only the idea remains present. The same two processes of concentration, with and without judicial action of the mind, may be applied also to things subtle. The gross leads into the subtle, and the subtle leads in progressive stages to that state of pure spiritual being designated as pradhana. All this constitutes meditation with seed. When this supercontemplative state is attained, the yogi acquires pure spiritual realization through the balanced quiet of the chit. His perception is now unfailingly exact. This particular perception is unique and reveals that which the rational mind cannot disclose. It is hostile to, or supersedes all other impressions. When this state of perception is itself also restrained, then is pure samadhi achieved. Om. The following instruction pertains to the science of union. Aum is the word of glory. It signifies the word made flesh and the manifestation upon the plane of matter of the second aspect of divinity. This blazing forth of the sons of righteousness before the world is achieved by adhering to the rules herein contained. When all the sons of men have demonstrated that they are also sons of God, the cosmic Son of God will likewise shine forth with increased intensity of glory. The great initiate, Paul, possessed a vision of this when he stated that the whole creation groaneth and travelleth in pain, waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. Raja Yoga, or the science of union, provides the rules and the means whereby conscious contact may be established with the soul, the second aspect, the Christ within. Knowledge of the self may be achieved and its control over the not-self maintained. The power of the ego or soul may be perceived in daily life and soul powers manifested. The lower psychic nature may be subdued and the higher psychic faculties demonstrated. The brain may be brought en rapport with the soul and its messages received. The light in the head may be increased, so that a man becomes a living flame, and the path may be discovered, and man himself become that path. The following triplicities may be found of value to the student, especially if he recollects that it is the central column which contains the terms applicable to the soul or second aspect. The union to be achieved is that of the third and second aspects. This is consummated at the third initiation. A subsequent synthesis is then effected between the united third and second aspects and the first. The presence, the angel of the presence, the human being. A clear distinction should be drawn between the Christ principle as indicated above, which constitutes a high spiritual aspect to which each member of humanity must attain, and the same term applied to a personage of exalted rank representing that principle, whether in the historical reference to the man of Nazareth or otherwise. This union is achieved through the subjugation of the psychic nature and the restraint of the chit. The aspirant pursuing union is charged with a twofold task. First, to acquire dominion over the versatile psychic nature, and second, to inhibit the mind from assuming the multifarious forms it so readily adopts. These phenomena are frequently designated as modifications of the thinking principle. These two accomplishments engender control of the emotional body, and consequently of desire, as well as control of the mental body, and thus of the lower manas or mind. The student must bear in remembrance that unbridled desire and an unregulated mind obstruct the light of the soul and negate spiritual consciousness. Union remains an impossibility so long as these barriers persist. Therefore, the master directs the student's attention toward the practical labor required to liberate this light, that it may shine forth within a dark place, specifically upon the physical plane. It must be retained in mind that, speaking in occult terms, when the lower nature is brought under control, it possesses the capacity to manifest the higher. When the second aspect of the lower personal self, the emotional body, is subjugated or transmuted, then the Christ light becomes visible. Subsequently, within that illumination, the monad, the Father, the One, shall stand revealed. Correspondingly, when the first aspect of the lower personal self, the mental body, is restrained, the will aspect of the ego may be comprehended, and through its activities, the purpose of the Logos himself shall be cognized. There exist specific lines of least resistance within the spiritual life, along which certain forces or energies are released. The emotional intuitional or Buddhic monadic to the heart of the aspirant, and the mental spiritual or atmic logoic to the head of the aspirant. Consequently, the student is provided the word of restraint or control as a master key to all his endeavors. The chit is the mind or mind stuff. It is the mental body, the faculty of thought and of thought form construction, and the sum total of mental processes. Indeed, it is the material governed by the ego or soul, out of which thought forms are fabricated. The psychic nature is kama manas, the emotional or astral body, faintly tinged with mind, constituting the material which clothes all our desires and feelings. It is thereby that they find expression. These two types of substance possess their own evolutionary trajectories to pursue, which they dutifully follow. Under the logoic plan, the spirits or divine sparks are imprisoned by these substances, having been initially attracted to them through the mutual interplay of spirit and matter. Through the control of these substances and the restraint of their instinctual activities, these spirits acquire experience and, eventually, liberation. Thus is union with the soul brought about. It is a union known and experienced within the physical body, upon the plane of densest manifestation, achieved through the conscious, intelligent control of the lower nature. When this has been accomplished, the yogi perceives himself as he exists in reality. This condition might be described in the following manner. The individual who comprehends the conditions and has fulfilled them as indicated in the preceding sutra, sees the self, realizes the true nature of the soul, identifies himself with the inner reality rather than the concealing forms, dwells in the center and no longer upon the periphery, achieves spiritual consciousness, and awakes to a recognition of the God within. Within these 3 verses, the method and the goal are delineated in clear and certain terms, and the way is prepared for the more detailed instruction to follow. The aspirant confronts his problem, the clue to its solution is accorded to him, and the reward, union with the soul, is held before his seeking eye. The past is briefly reviewed in the subsequent verse. Hitherto, the inner man has identified himself with his forms and with their active modifications. These forms are the modifications mentioned in the various translations, conveying the subtle truth concerning the infinite divisibility of the atom, and they constitute the veiling sheaths and rapidly changing transformations which prevent the true nature of the soul from becoming manifest. These are the externalities which hinder the light of the inner God from shining forth, and which are occultly described as casting a shadow before the face of the sun. The inherent nature of the lives constituting these active, versatile forms has hitherto proved too potent for the soul, and the soul powers have been denied full expression. The instinctual powers of the animal soul, or the capacities of the aggregate of lives forming the sheaths or bodies, imprison the real man and limit his powers. These lives are intelligent units upon the involutionary arc of evolution, working toward self-expression. Their objective, however, differs from that of the inner man, and they hinder his progress and self-realization. He becomes enmeshed in their activities and must emancipate himself before he may enter into his heritage of power, peace, and bliss. He cannot attain unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of the Christ until there are no modifications to be felt, until the forms are transformed, their activities quieted, and their restlessness stilled. The student is urged to bear in mind the nature of this aspect of evolution, which is proceeding concurrently with his own. In his correct apprehension of this problem comes the realization of the practical labor to be undertaken, and the embryo yogi may commence his work. The lower forms are constantly and ceaselessly active, endlessly assuming the guises of impulsive desires or dynamic mental thought forms. It is only as this form-taking is controlled, and the tumult of the lower nature stilled, that it becomes possible for the inner ruling entity to liberate himself from thraldom and impose his vibration upon the lower modifications. This is achieved through concentration, the concentrated effort of the soul to maintain steadily the position of observer, of perceiver, and of seer. When he can accomplish this, the lower spectacle of the rapidly changing forms of thought and desire fades away, and the realm of the soul, the true field of soul knowledge, can be perceived and contacted. The mind states are 5 in number and are subject to pleasure or pain. They are categorized as painful or not painful. In the original text, the word pleasure does not occur. The concept conveyed is more technical and is usually translated as not painful. Nevertheless, the underlying concept is the hindrance to realization caused by the pairs of opposites. The student must remember that in this sutra, it is the chit or mind stuff that is under consideration, along with the modifications it undergoes so long as its versatility and activity remain controlling factors. He must not lose sight of the fact that we are dealing with the lower psychic nature, which is the term occultly applied to the lower mind processes as well as to the astral or emotional reactions. All activity within the lower nature is the result of kamamanas, or of mind tinged with feeling, and of the desire will of the lower man. The goal of the Raja Yoga system is that these impulses should be superseded by the considered, intelligent action of the soul or spiritual man, whose nature is love, whose acts are wise, and whose motive is group development. Therefore, that reaction called pain must be transcended, and likewise that termed pleasure, for both are dependent upon identification with form. Non-attachment must supersede them. It is pertinent to note that the modifications of the internal organ, the mind, are 5 in number. Manas, or mind, the actuating principle of the chit or mind stuff, is the 5th principle, and like all else in nature, it manifests as a duality. This duality consists of the lower concrete mind, demonstrating as the activity of the mental body, and the abstract mind, demonstrating as the lowest aspect of the ego. In the microcosm man, this duality becomes a triple modification upon the mental plane, and within these three, we possess in miniature a picture of the macrocosmic manifestation. These three are the mental permanent atom, the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad or of the soul, the egoic body, the causal body, or the Karana Sarira, and the mental body, the highest aspect of the lower personal self. The mental body itself possesses 5 modifications or activities. Consequently, it constitutes a reflection or correspondence of the 5th principle as that principle manifests upon the 5th plane, the mental. These modifications represent the lower shadow of Manas, and this mind serves as a reflection of Mahit, or mind manifesting within the macrocosm. This presents a profound mystery. However, it shall reveal itself to the individual who surmounts the 5 modifications of the lower mind, who, through non-attachment to the lower, identifies himself with the higher, and who thereby resolves the mystery of the Makara and treads the way of the Kamaras. Herein lies an intimation for the more advanced students of this science regarding the esoteric problem of the Makara, as alluded to in The Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky. These modifications are correct knowledge, incorrect knowledge, fancy, passivity, and memory. There exists a vast sphere of knowledge which the seer must cognize at one juncture or another. It is generally conceded among occult psychologists that there exist 3 modes of apprehension. Direct cognition through the avenue of the senses. Each sense, when utilized, places the user in contact with a distinct range of vibrations, demonstrating as form manifestations. Deduction or inference, which involves the use by the cognizer of the reasoning faculties of the mind in relation to that which is not directly perceived. For the occult student, this constitutes the application of the law of correspondences or of analogy. The direct cognition of the yogi or seer, centered within the consciousness of the self, the ego upon its own plane. This is achieved through the correct employment of the mind as an organ of vision and transmission. Patanjali states, "The seer is pure knowledge. Though pure, he looks upon the presented idea through the medium of the mind." Book 2, Sutra 20. Deduction is not an infallible method of ascertaining knowledge, and the other modifications refer primarily to the erroneous use of the image-making faculty, to the self-induced passivity of the mind, a condition of semi-trance, and to the retention of thought forms within the mental aura through the exercise of memory. Each of these is subsequently addressed in a separate sutra by Patanjali. The foundation of correct knowledge is correct perception, correct deduction, and correct witness. One of the most revolutionary realizations to which the occult student must adjust himself is the appreciation that the mind is a means whereby knowledge is to be acquired. In the West, the prevailing concept has been that the mind is that component of the human mechanism which utilizes knowledge. The process of turning matters over in the mind, of striving to resolve problems through arduous mental labor, ultimately plays no part in the unfoldment of the soul. It is merely a preliminary stage and must be superseded by a different method. The student of Raja Yoga must realize that the mind is intended to serve as an organ of perception. Only thus will he arrive at a correct understanding of this science. The process to be followed in relation to the mind might be delineated somewhat as follows. Right control of the modifications of the thinking principle. Stabilization of the mind and its subsequent utilization by the soul as an organ of vision, a 6th sense, and the synthesis of all the 5 other senses. Result: correct knowledge. Right use of the perceiving faculty, such that the new field of knowledge now contacted is viewed as it truly is. That which is perceived is rightly interpreted through the subsequent ascent of the intuition and the reason. Right transmission to the physical brain of that which has been perceived, whereby the testimony of the sixth sense is correctly interpreted, and the evidence is transmitted with occult accuracy. Result: correct reaction of the physical brain to the transmitted knowledge. When this process is studied and adhered to, the man upon the physical plane becomes increasingly aware of the concerns of the soul and the mysteries of the soul realm or the kingdom of God. All group concerns and the nature of group consciousness are revealed unto him. It will be noted that these rules are, even now, regarded somewhat as essential premises where all accurate testimony is under consideration in world affairs. When these same rules are carried forward into the realm of psychic endeavor, then we shall perceive a simplification of the present confusion. In an ancient text written for disciples of a certain degree, these words occur and are of value to all probationary and accepted disciples. The translation conveys the sense and is not literal. Let the one who looks out take care that the window through which he gazes transmits the light of the sun. If he uses it in the early dawn, let him remember that the orb has not yet risen. The clear-cut outlines cannot be perceived, and wraiths and shadows, gloomy spaces and areas full of darkness as yet confuse his vision. At the conclusion of this passage is found a curious symbol, which conveys to the disciple's mind the admonition: keep silent and reserve your opinion. Incorrect knowledge is based upon perception of the form and not upon the state of being. This sutra is somewhat difficult to paraphrase. Its significance consists in the following: knowledge, deduction, and a decision based upon externals, and upon the form through which any life in any kingdom of nature expresses itself, constitute false and untrue knowledge. At this stage in the evolutionary process, no form of any kind measures up to, nor acts as an adequate expression of, the indwelling life. No true adept judges any expression of divinity through its third aspect. Raja Yoga trains a man to function in his second aspect, and through that second aspect to place himself en rapport with the true nature latent in any form. It is the being that is the essential reality, and all beings are struggling toward true expression. Therefore, all knowledge acquired through the medium of the lower faculties, and which is based upon the form aspect, is incorrect knowledge. The soul alone perceives correctly. The soul alone possesses the power to contact the germ or the principle of buddhi found at the heart of every atom, whether it be the atom of matter as studied in the laboratory of the scientist, the human atom in the crucible of daily experience, the planetary atom, within whose ring pass not all our kingdoms of nature are found, or the solar atom, God in manifestation through the medium of a solar system. Christ knew what was in man and therefore could be a savior. Fancy rests upon images which possess no real existence. This signifies that such images have no real existence insofar as they are conjured by men themselves, constructed within their own mental auras, energized by their will or desire, and are consequently dissipated when attention is directed elsewhere. Energy follows thought is a basic tenet of the Raja Yoga system and holds true even where these images of fancy are concerned. These fancied images fall primarily into three groups, which the student would do well to consider: those thought forms which he constructs himself, which possess an evanescent life and are dependent upon the quality of his desires. Being, therefore, neither good nor evil, low nor high, they can be vitalized by low tendencies or idealistic aspirations, with all the intermediate stages to be found between these extremes. The aspirant must guard himself in order that he may not mistake these for reality. An illustration might well be provided here regarding the facility with which people judge they have seen one of the brothers, whereas all they have perceived is a thought form of one of them. The wish being father to the thought, they are the victim of that form of incorrect perception called by Patanjali fancy. Those thought forms which are created by the race, the nation, the group, or the organization. Group thought forms of any kind constitute the sum total of the great illusion. Herein lies a hint to the earnest aspirant. Reference is made here to that thought form generated by a man since his first appearance in physical incarnation, and designated as the dweller on the threshold. As it is engendered by the lower personal self rather than by the soul, it possesses an essentially impermanent nature and is maintained solely by the man's lower energies. When the individual commences to function as the soul, this image, fabricated through his fancy or his reaction to delusion, is dissipated by a supreme exertion. It possesses no genuine existence once there remains nothing within the aspirant to sustain it, and the realization of this fact empowers him to liberate himself from its thraldom. This constitutes one of the sutras which, though apparently brief and uncomplicated, is of the most profound significance. It is scrutinized by exalted initiates who are mastering the nature of the planetary creative process, and who are concerned with the dissipation of planetary Maya. Passivity is founded upon the quiescent state of the vritis. Some elucidation regarding the nature of the vritis is perhaps requisite here. The vritis are those activities of the mind which eventuate in a conscious relationship between the sense employed and that which is sensed. Absent a certain modification of the mental process, or an assertion of the I am I realization, the senses might remain active whilst the man remains unaware of them. The individual is aware that he sees, tastes, or hears. He declares, I see, I taste, I hear, and it is the activity of the vritis which enables him to cognize this fact. By withdrawing himself from active sense perception, by ceasing to employ the outward-going consciousness, and by abstracting that consciousness from the periphery to the center, he may induce a condition of passivity, a lack of awareness, which is neither the samadhi of the yogi nor the achievement of single-pointedness to which the student of yoga aspires, but is rather a form of trance. This self-imposed silencing is not merely a detriment to the attainment of the highest yoga but is, in many instances, exceedingly perilous. Students would be well advised to remember that the right activity of the mind and its correct usage constitute the goal of yoga, and that the state designated as a blank mind, a condition of passive receptivity with sense relations severed or atrophied, forms no part of the process. The sleep herein referred to is not the descent of the body into the state of slumber, but rather the rendering of the vritis into a dormant state. It is the negation of sensory contacts without the sixth sense, the mind superseding their activities. In this condition of sleep, a man becomes susceptible to hallucination, to delusion, to erroneous impressions, and to obsessions. Sleep is of several varieties, and only a brief tabulation is possible within a commentary such as this. 1. The ordinary sleep of the physical body, wherein the brain does not respond to any sense contacts. 2. The sleep of the vritis, or of those modifications of the mental processes which correlate the individual with his environment through the medium of the senses and the mind. 3. The sleep of the soul which, occultly speaking, encompasses that portion of human experience dating from a man's initial human incarnation until he awakens to a knowledge of the plan and endeavors to align the lower man with the nature and will of the inner spiritual man. 4. The sleep of the ordinary medium, wherein the etheric body is partially extruded from the physical body and is likewise separated from the astral body, thereby inducing a condition of very real danger. 5. Samadhi, or the sleep of the yogi, the result of the conscious, scientific withdrawal of the real man from his lower threefold she. 80H, in order to labor upon higher levels, preparatory to active service upon the lower. 6. The sleep of the nirmanakas, which is a condition of such intense spiritual concentration and focusing within the spiritual or atmic body that the outward-going consciousness is withdrawn not only from the three planes of human endeavor but likewise from the two lower expressions of the spiritual triad. For the purposes of his peculiar and specific work, the Nirmanakya sleeps to all states save that of the third, or atmic, plane. Memory is the retention of that which has been known. This memory concerns several groups of realizations, either active or latent. It addresses certain congeries of known factors which might be enumerated as follows. 1. The thought images of that which is tangible and objective, and which has been known by the thinker upon the physical plane. 2. Kama-manasic images of past desires and their gratification. The picture-making faculty of the average man is based upon his desires and their known gratification. This remains equally true of the memory of a gluttonous man, for instance, and his latent image of a satisfactory repast, and the memory of the orthodox saint, based upon his picture-making of a joyous heaven. 3. That memory activity which is the result of mental training, the accumulation of acquired facts, and the consequence of reading or teaching, which is not purely based upon desire, but has its basis in intellectual interest. 4. All the various contacts which the memory holds and recognizes as emanating from the 5 lower sense perceptions. 5. Those mental images, latent in the memory-making faculty, which constitute the sum total of the knowledge contacted and the realizations evoked by the right use of the mind as a sixth sense. All these forms of the memory faculty must be relinquished and no longer retained. They must be recognized as modifications of the mind, of the thinking principle, and therefore as part of that versatile psychic nature which must be dominated before the yogi can hope to attain liberation from limitation and from all lower activity. This constitutes the goal. Finally, memory also includes the accumulated experiences gained by the soul through its many incarnations, stored within the true consciousness of the soul. The control of these modifications of the internal organ, the mind, is to be achieved through tireless endeavor and through non-attachment. A few brief explanations are all that is necessary regarding a sutra as readily apprehended as this one. Intellectually, its meaning is clear, though in practice it is difficult to execute. The internal organ is, naturally, the mind. Occidental thinkers should recall that the Eastern occultist does not consider the organs to be merely the physical organs. The rationale for this is that the physical body, in its dense or concrete form, is not regarded as a principle, but simply as the tangible manifestation of the activity of the true principles. The organs, occultly speaking, are such centers of activity as the mind, the various permanent atoms, and the centers of force within the various sheaths. These all possess their objective shadows or results, and these resultant emanations constitute the external physical organs. The brain, for instance, is the shadow or the external organ of the mind. It will be ascertained by the investigator that the contents of the cranial cavity bear a correspondence to the aspects of the human mechanism found upon the mental plane. This latter sentence should be emphasized. It conveys a hint to those capable of availing themselves of it. Tireless endeavor signifies, literally, constant practice, ceaseless repetition, and the reiterated effort to impose the new rhythm upon the old, as well as to efface deep-seated habits and modifications by the institution of soul impression. The yogi or master is the result of patient endurance. His achievement is the fruit of a steady effort based upon an intelligent appreciation of the work to be undertaken and the goal to be attained, rather than upon spasmodic enthusiasm. Non-attachment is the factor that eventually compels all sense perceptions to perform their legitimate functions. Through non-attachment to those forms of knowledge with which the senses bring a man into contact, they continuously relinquish their hold over him. The time eventually arrives when he is liberated, becoming the master of his senses and of all sense contacts. This condition does not imply a state wherein the senses are atrophied or rendered obsolete. Rather, it is one in which they remain serviceable to the yogi, to be employed at his discretion and to the precise extent he determines, thereby utilizing them to augment his efficacy in collective service and endeavor. Tireless endeavor is defined as the constant exertion to inhibit the modifications of the mind. This particular sutra presents one of the most formidable challenges in translation regarding the conveyance of its true significance. The inherent concept pertains to the unceasing exertion put forth by the spiritual man to curb the modifications or fluctuations of the mental faculty and to govern the lower, versatile psychic nature, thereby allowing for the full expression of his intrinsic spiritual essence. Thus, and exclusively thus, may the spiritual man manifest the life of the soul daily upon the physical plane. Charles Johnston, in his translation, endeavors to capture this meaning through the phrasing. The right use of the will is the steady effort to stand in spiritual being. The underlying principle involves applying the same discipline to the mind as that to which the 5 lower senses are subjected. Their centrifugal activities are arrested, and they are restrained from responding to the gravitation or attraction of their respective fields of knowledge. When the objective to be secured is sufficiently prized, and the endeavors toward its attainment are pursued persistently and without intermission, then the stability of the mind is assured. All adherents of Raja Yoga must initially be devotees. Only a profound love for the soul, and for all that knowledge of the soul entails, will propel the aspirant with sufficient steadfastness toward his destination. The ultimate objective, union with the soul and consequently with the Oversoul and all souls, must be justly appraised, the rationale for its achievement correctly adjudicated, and the anticipated results most earnestly desired before the aspirant can exert the requisite effort to establish dominion over the mental modifications and, by extension, his entire lower nature. When this appreciation is sufficiently genuine, and the capacity to proceed with the labor of subjugation and control operates without intermission, the moment will arrive when the student shall consciously and increasingly comprehend the significance of restraining these modifications. Non-attachment is defined as liberation from the craving for any object of desire, whether earthly or traditional, whether present or in the hereafter. Non-attachment may also be characterized as thirstlessness. This is the most precise occult terminology to employ, as it encompasses the dual concept of water, the symbol of material existence, and desire, the quality of the astral plane, which is likewise symbolized by water. The metaphor of man as the fish is curiously comprehensive in this context. This symbol possesses 7 significances. 2 are pertinent to the present discussion. The fish serves as the symbol of the Vishnu aspect, the Christ principle, the second aspect of divinity, and the Christ in incarnation, whether referring to the cosmic Christ or the individual Christ, the potential Savior latent within each human being. This constitutes the Christ in you, the hope of glory. Should the student also investigate the fish avatar of Vishnu, he shall acquire further enlightenment. The fish swimming within the waters of matter represents an extension of this same concept, merely transposed to its more obvious present expression. Man as the personality, where there exists no longing for any object whatsoever, and where desire for rebirth is extinguished, true thirstlessness is attained. The liberated man then turns his back upon all forms within the Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.